All right, hello, Honors 110. So we are officially in the post-unit part of the course, which means we're really in the home stretch now. So for today's readings, we had Elizabeth McCracken's story, Property, as well as Erica Trable's essay, List of Concerns. So to jump right in here, first thing I want to ask, and this will be is kind of a lead into the story Property. I consider this story to be about a lot of things, but kind of principal among them, the notion of physical objects and kind of their interaction with kind of our identity and kind of what we value and so on and so forth. So with that, I want to kind of leave an open-ended question here for the discussion about what do you consider to be kind of your most valued physical possession? And we'll remove people and pets and kind of anything living from this equation, but just kind of again the physical items that you kind of own. What do you kind of place the most weight on? And you can kind of think about this through a lens of more literal valuable things that cost a lot of money, practical things used in your day-to-day life, but also those sentimental things maybe that kind of mean a lot to you. And sometimes I frame this question as, if there were a fire in your home, what would be the main thing you would first think? I want to make sure I grab this and make sure that it's safe. So with that said, let's dive into Property itself as a story. So I want to start with the ad that begins this story. So it reads, the ad should have said, for rent, 6-room hovel, quarter-filled Mrs. Butterworth's bottle in living room, sandy sheets throughout, lingering smell. Or wanted, gullible tenant for small house, must possess appreciation for chipped pottery, mid-1960s abstract silk-screened canvases, mouse-nibbled books on Georgia O'Keeffe. Or available June 1st, shithole. This passage here, I think, gives us our first glimpse into our point of view character, Stoney, and kind of his outlook on the world, his attitude, his voice, so on and so forth. Later on, there's this moment here where he's referring to like all the stuff he sees kind of left behind in this drawer, and says that there's no other word for it but detritus. Detritus, if we take as a literal vocabulary word, means sort of stuff kind of left behind. There's a specific definition that goes with biological material left behind. So it typically means like dead skin, skeletons, fecal matter, things along those lines. Part of why I want to highlight the beginning of the story as well as that particular vocab choice comes to just Stoney being incredibly cynical in this story, incredibly pessimistic in how he's looking at everything. But I do think that that's quite excusable in this story given the circumstances. And so ordinarily, if this were an in-person class, I'd love to tease this out in kind of a series of questions and talking about it. In this format, it lends itself a little bit less to that kind of reveal for the plot of a story. So just to kind of talk through some of the essential pieces here, Stoney moves into this house thinking it's going to be a rental where he can just put all of his stuff. He's not expecting it to be littered with someone else's belongings. He also expects, probably more importantly, to moving in with his wife, who he's just married. She dies shortly before he moves in here when he's off traveling with her, and so kind of automatically he's sort of set up for this space of seeing this space as sort of its worst light, because he's kind of has that kind of the opposite of rose-colored lenses looking at the world here. But so with that, he comes to this house. He finds it kind of in disrepair. I want to go to page 201 into 202. So this is the end of the 5th page of the PDF into the 6th page. So it's Sally wrote back. We cleaned the house in May, top to bottom, and it took a lot of time to dust the books. I did it myself. I cleaned the coffee rings off the bookcase. We laundered all the bedclothes. I'm sorry that you found the house is not what you expected. I'm sorry the summer people have caused so much damage. This can't have been pleasant for you. But it seems you're asking a great deal for a 9-month rental. We lived modestly all our lives, I'm afraid, and perhaps this is not what you pictured from Europe. I do feel as though we've bent over backwards for you so far. He went over this in a confused rage. So in this one, we have this email where he's kind of complained that the house is in such poor repair, and gets back this. I'm going to describe this email as pretty dismissive. And so to break it down a little bit, she's talking about, we cleaned the house back in May. He's moving into it in August. She's sorry the summer people did so much damage. To put that in context, because I know for many of you, I have to imagine, being in a space where you're renting an apartment or renting a room in a house or things along those lines. Saying that he moved in this place months after they cleaned it. Other people have stayed in the interim, and she's complaining like, we cleaned the house in May. What are you worried about? And him saying like, that's been months, and there's been other people living here in between. Like, this needs to be cleaned again. And then her last part there, where I'm afraid this isn't what you expected from Europe. The way I read that is sort of there's sort of a projecting that like, oh, you're a fancy pants person who's traveling throughout Europe. Our little modest house doesn't impress you, right? Where I think Stoney's perspective on it is, my wife died in Europe. I'm just coming here to live my life, and you're kind of making fun of me for this. And so obviously there's a real disconnect between these two parties, kind of in how they're communicating and how they're understanding the situation at hand. But going on to 208 by the numbered pages here, we have this scene play out where Sally and Stoney kind of actually interact with each other. And she observes that he's kind of rearranged so much stuff, moved furniture, thrown away things, so on and so forth. And it's a lot to have done for only 9 months, she says. And I want to pose that as a question to the room of 9 months living in a space. Is that enough time for someone to kind of customize it themselves, kind of make it their own in that way? Is that a small enough period of time really someone shouldn't change very much if they're renting a property? I think there's a lot of subjectivity there about how long we really feel like 9 months is and what kind of the person living there's rights might be around that. But then also the heart of this story to me comes in the very late stages of it, when Stoney kind of realizes what's going on. Again, I'd love to use that more in questions, but I want to make sure we kind of have a common understanding of this reading, because I think it's kind of powerful when you get into it. So to just read a couple of quotes from this, it's not the last, it's a big paragraph on page 208 towards the middle of the page. Where Stoney realizes she had not left her worst things behind for 4 years ago, but her best things. And then she bought herself a cheap salad spinner so that her tenants could use this one, which worked so well. All of this, Stoney throughout the story has assumed that they just kind of left this place in sort of a junky state with all their stuff lying around, only to kind of have the revelation at this moment of, no, they actually left like their best stuff behind, because she wanted to make sure that people enjoyed it, were comfortable with it, it felt like home, so on and so forth. And part of what I love about this aspect of the story, beyond what we've already talked about, which is kind of people having different understandings of a situation, having to figure out how the other is thinking, is I think a lot of people at some point in life will actually find themselves in Sally's shoes here, where you've kind of bent over backwards trying to do something nice for somebody, and they don't recognize it at all. One way I always kind of relate this to in my role as a professor is, I know there's a lot of reading for a class like this, and sometimes, especially in my in-person classes, I hear students kind of grumbling in the hallway about, oh man, there's like 25 pages of reading for this class. Whereas I'm sitting here in my perspective and saying, man, I've been studying literature for over 2 decades. I gave you the best stuff. I gave you the stuff I thought would be the most interesting, the most fun to read, the most thought-provoking, so on and so forth. And here you are complaining about page length and so on and so forth. How ungrateful, right? And so, Richard, this is meant as a knock on anyone. Just sort of more of a fun observation that this does happen in real life, right? Where we have kind of the best intentions in giving someone something, and they just don't kind of receive, that thing we're giving them, that gift, in quite the way that it was intended. But okay, so please feel free. I know I didn't ask a lot of questions about property, but please feel free to weigh in with additional thoughts, questions, so on and so forth, as always. But let's move along to the Traybold essay here. This thing is framed as a list, and so I wanted to start just by looking at the very beginnings of this thing. Specifically, the first, let's just say maybe the first. Maybe 9 of these things on the list. They're all pretty short. So from a list of concerns from the very first page here. 1, the size of paper cut compared to its sting. 2, a bandage run under the tap, the soggy reminder. 3, glue left behind on wrinkled skin. 4, the way I was told to behave. 5, don't pick the flowers. 6, don't walk on the grass. 7, wear black to a funeral. 8, in lieu of flowers, send money. 9, the apologies I can't remember if I've made. So I want to read just this first snippet here. So the thing is framed as a list of concerns. I think we can take this literally as a list, like each one of these items is a different cause for concern of some sort or another. And I think that you could like just hop around this thing and cherry pick any given entry. And for the most part, it works out that it does sort of, make sense as like this thing is a concern, right? So for example, if we jump straight to number 3, glue left behind on wrinkled skin, right? You might think of a bandage. You might think of just like when you were a kid and you were doing like arts and crafts project and like when glue got stuck on your hand and kind of that weird feeling left on your skin. But because of the way that it's structured though, it sort of invites us to go back and read 1, 2, and 3 together. The size of the paper cut compared to its sting, the bandage run under the tap, the soggy reminder, the glue left behind on wrinkled skin. So we got a paper cut, we put a bandage on it, we ran the bandage under the tap, we're washing our hands, the glue left behind afterwards. All these things kind of work together. And it's one of the tricks of this essay, and a lot of times with more kind of experimental essays of some kind or another, is that they tend to work in more than one way. And one of the kind of ways in which this essay is working is, I think, the first entries, I'll be honest, I don't think the first 3 are particularly profound, but I do think they're kind of teaching us how to read this essay. You have to kind of consider each of these items in combination with the ones that come before and after them. So similarly, I think we kind of up the stakes a little bit with 4 through 7 here. The ways I was told to behave, presumably the ones that follow are ways in which Traybold was told to behave. They're put in quotation marks as if someone's telling her them. So don't pick the flowers, don't walk in the grass. And those kind of, make sense again as their own kind of concerns, like don't pick the flowers, like don't pick other people's flowers if you see them out. Don't walk in the grass. People often have like really nicely manicured lawns, especially here in the desert. It might be that if someone does have grass, that's kind of, prized property that they're taking really good care of. But then the next one being wear black to a funeral. So it's, don't pick the flowers from the graves. Don't run in the grass in the cemetery over these dead bodies, right? It takes on a whole different gravitas when we start to read these things together and let them kind of inform each other in different ways. And number 8, in lieu of flowers, send money. This one, I think it does speak to the preceding one about this is a funeral context, someone has died. But I would also suggest there's a piece of this that in and of itself, why this would be sort of a concern. In lieu of flowers, send money. To send flowers is often kind of seen as a gesture of like, condolence, of sympathy. I'm going to send you something beautiful to kind of help fill that void of what you've lost or what you're going through. When someone is asking you not to send flowers, but to instead send money, there is a piece that to me sort of it's a concern because this person isn't too proud to beg at this point. This person is realizing they're facing a situation where they need money and they're not afraid to ask for it because they need it that badly. It would be at least the way that I would read that. So I think that there's a lot going on here about kind of different places in life where people are and a different kind of reconciling memories with where people are now sort of throughout this thing. But so to ask some questions and kind of give us some food for thought related to this essay. I'm curious of our overall reaction to Traybold. So this is an essay, this is nonfiction, this is Traybold writing about her own experience. What we sort of think of the way that she kind of conducts herself with her friends. We have all kinds of examples from different stages of life, but some of them include some pretty, I would argue, unflattering moments of Traybold, talking about like when they're setting up for a friend's wedding, her kind of making kind of a catty remark that when I get married, I'm going to pay for all of the dresses and the flowers and people aren't going to have to do work for me at the wedding. There's also that kind of childhood exchange where she thinks her friend stole her pen and is pretty mean to her. So what we sort of think of Traybold in the context of this essay, maybe why she's writing this thing overall. Some other ideas here in 22 to 25 in the list. I'm not going to actually read these items here, but there's all this talk of the prairie. I'm curious of what people think the prairie kind of represents in this essay, maybe what they thought around this section of it. In 26, it's a really short one. I'll read this one. The fact that adventure used to be my favorite word. Why would that be a concern? I think it's a pretty interesting one. And there's a few different levels on which we can read it in terms of like the literal past of like that the fact that adventure was her favorite word is concerning. Or maybe the emphasis should be on the fact that it used to be, that it's not anymore. But I'm curious how people take that and why we kind of read that as a concern. Otherwise here, there's, you know what, actually, I think I've covered, yeah, I covered most of the specific parts I want to get at. So actually, the last thing I'll kind of get to here, although there's so much more to kind of unpack in this essay, but just for time's sake, is just the format of this essay, doing it as a list. It's an unconventional choice, right? And so I referenced a little bit some of how that functions and how different list items kind of interact with each other. But what was the impact for you as a reader? Why do we think that Trable did it? Okay, we're running a little bit long for this video lecture, so I'm going to go ahead and cut myself off there. As always, I will look forward to our discussion. Thanks for watching.